Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to tune in today. And today I'm delighted to be joined by executive coach Jesseca Tighe, who is here to discuss her work in helping clients manage stress and burnout. Jessica has over 20 years of experience in healthcare and holds a Ph.D. in psychology and helps healthcare leaders succeed without sacrificing their health and well-being. Jessica is dedicated to guiding others towards sustainable success where personal health and professional achievements go hand in hand. She does this by helping professionals take their leadership to the next level without burnout. Jessica has dedicated her career to empowering professionals and leaders who feel frustrated, stuck, or are seeking to elevate their leadership skills. By integrating her professional insights with her personal passions, Jessica creates a supportive environment where leaders and professionals can thrive, heal, and uncover their true purpose. Stress and burnout doesn't really affect that many people, does it, Jessica?
Oh, very small percentage of people. Yeah, very niche.
Yeah, of course. Jessica, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm delighted. So you have a very strong background in healthcare, and obviously you have a very strong academic background with your PhD. So let's talk about the journey thus far that got you to the spot where you realized you had a passion for helping
Yeah.
people, for coaching people, and the specific nuances of stress and burnout.
Yeah. Well, I went into psychology originally because I always loved puzzles when I was a kid, and human beings are full of mystery, and that's really why I went into psychology because I just followed my interest in people
Yeah.
and understanding how people work and what makes them tick. And I worked as a mental health therapist for many years, worked all the way through graduate school. 10 out of 10 do not recommend, but I did. And I then I transitioned into healthcare administration and then wanted to work with people again. So when I wanted to start my own business and start my own practice, I decided to meld the two. So I decided to meld my leadership skills and then meld my psychology background and help people who are really in this space that I myself have been in many times, and that watched colleagues go into many times, especially in the healthcare field, and recover from stress and burnout, and really help them inoculate themselves so they never have to go through that again, and they don't have to just job hop or change careers or go out of the industry completely. I'm all about maintaining their talents where they are, and we can't afford to lose anybody in the healthcare field. There's already a shortage of nurses, there's already a shortage of healthcare folks, and we can't afford to lose anybody. So that's where I come in, is I help them have a different relationship to work so that they can actually stay where they're at.
Yeah, I love the inoculate reference
Hmm.
there, and but I'm sure that's not lost on anyone. Why do you think? I know there's some very obvious reasons in terms of frontline personnel and such, but taking healthcare as an industry as a whole, why do you think there are nuances that are more prevalent for stress and burnout in healthcare
Hmm.
as opposed to potentially some other industries?
Yeah. Well, what I'm about to say isn't specific necessarily to healthcare, but what I've found is that people who go into the healing professions, they're intrinsically motivated to give more than they receive. Us healthcare folks, us people who care with a capital C, we get a bonus internally from giving more than we receive and from helping others heal. But that can very easily cross the line into stress and burnout when we're giving too much of ourselves, and then the regular rewards of work are not enough to compensate us for the amount of energy that we're channeling into that work and channeling into others that we so freely give. But we're not giving it to ourselves. And it just happens so easily. And I don't think that's specific to necessarily healthcare folks. I think there's other professions where that definitely happens for people. And if you don't know where those boundaries are for yourself, it's so easy to just, have those little permissions of, like, well, I'll just check my email at the end of the day, or I'll just do that one last thing, or I'll just read my email in the morning while I'm having my coffee, or I'll just work on Sunday so that Monday's not so crazy. Those little allowances, we call it behavioral drift in psychology. We drift off course, and then before we know it, we're stressed out, we're burnt out, we're ready to literally do anything else other than, what we're doing. And then we have no idea how we got here and have no idea how to get back. And that's what I help people do, is to help them get back to center.
Yeah. And is it fair to say that it's somewhat cultural or systemic within healthcare? I have this vision of people joining typically at a junior level, as they start their career, and then they move up, and it becomes a cultural norm where you put in those extra shifts or those extra efforts that it doesn't feel like a big deal. I'm just sitting on the couch anyway, but you're not turning off, you're not switching off, you're not resting and giving yourself a chance to recover. And then the higher up you go, there's a continued expectation, and then you have an inferred expectation or maybe explicit expectation of those who are coming behind you to say, that's just what we do here. That's just the way that it has to, welcome to healthcare or anything. Is there a cultural challenge that you're seeing, based on your experience and your work with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And I was an offender of this as well when I was an administrator. I told my employees, like, hey, guys, like, there are no holidays in healthcare. There are no weekends in healthcare. Love your problems. This is good stress. I was a offender of saying those things too. But yes, it is entirely a culture, because healthcare is 24/7. It's 24/7, 365. You don't work the job, it works you. There is always more to do. There's always an opportunity to work harder, faster, longer. There's never time to just, sit back and relax. There's not a slow day. There's not a slow season. It's constant. And because that's the culture, we say these things to keep us going on that hamster wheel, and wellness and rest are not prioritized. And then especially because of, the privatization of healthcare, because of, the investor world has now come in to healthcare, and, they want to see larger margins and larger profits, and we're managing to the financial statement instead of actually taking to the care of the people who are actually doing that frontline work. Now it's even worse than it ever has been.
Yeah. My sister, one of my sisters back home is a nurse, and was in what we call back home A&E, accident and emergency, which we call here in North America the emergency room, and went straight there, went straight to the A&E, to the ER, and stayed there for a very long time, which my understanding in speaking with her is it's not too common that people would stay there. There's the odd lifer, so to speak, but for the majority of the time you go there, you get some experience, you understand how the process works, and then you transition to somewhere else. And from the stories that she shares, without breaking any confidences or anything like that, just at kind of high level, what sort of stuff is going on, it's an incredibly taxing job to the point where she becomes ill, not because of catching anything from a particular patient, but literal burnout, literal stress, that manifests itself in different ways. And I often have this, I don't know that I would say this, maybe I would, to a healthcare professional, but when they say, okay, Gary, you're going to be okay, everything's fine, we've got you under control now, what it's really going to take here is rest, recuperation, look after yourself, tone down the screen time, just take it easy, spend some time in nature. After this conversation, Jesseca, I'm going to say, is that what you would do? And I want just purely to see what their answer is, because their answer, if they're being very honest, is that's what I should do. That's not what I asked. Is that what you would do? And just to see, because it becomes then very much a do as I say, don't do as I do, or do as I would do. Because I don't know that Caroline is my sister. I don't know that she was looking after people constantly for 12-hour shifts all day, every day, and with the odd break where you could sit and maybe wolf down a sandwich or have a cup of coffee or whatever that looks like, and zero processing time, on, go, go, go. So many different key stakeholders needing different things at different times, whether it's administrative, whether it's physical help, whether it's, a genuine caring ear for the patient or something like that. And I think about all these plates spinning. When do you get to look after yourself? Where is the care in healthcare for the healthcare professionals? And it's not even so much a question as an observation of how do you even unpack that to say how can we make it guilt appropriate and doable to have a break
Right.
and guilt free, where you're not leaving someone in distress. There's enough backup that people could take over your shift or your patients or whatever that terminology is. How do you have an appropriate lunch break? How do you make sure you have enough time to possibly go outside if that's your thing? And then how do you guilt-free clock out when you're supposed to clock out, and you have a process that says you've been here for too long, you have to go. You're actually not helping anymore, even if you think you are. I don't know enough about it to see whether that exists or not. It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, yeah. It all starts with the leadership, which is why that's who I focus on, is how to be a better leader in this environment and how to actually, I say let's lead with purpose and live with balance, and let's practice what we preach.
Yeah.
And that's the key. It really starts with leadership. And I am aware of, certain leaders and practices who really do put their own wellness and the wellness of their employees first. And it
Yeah.
does require a change in, it requires a change in the scheduling. It requires enough backup, like you said. It requires different staffing levels. It requires a different focus too. It requires us to really focus on rest and recovery, and what does rest actually look like. And it's not watching Netflix and playing Wordle on your phone. That's not
Yeah.
rest. You're not letting your brain rest. Just a preview. Let's figure out what rest and recovery actually looks like, and instead of putting stress on an already stressed system, let's figure out what you can actually do to make a difference in the lives of the people who are doing this important work, so that they can continue to do it, so that mistakes aren't made, so that they're not up for 36 hours and making a mistake with a patient. That's when some of those things happen. That's when some of those horror stories happen. And we can't continue to do that. We can't continue to run on that hamster wheel. It's just not sustainable. And I think more and more people are recognizing that. People just aren't sure what interventions to put in place, necessarily, because EAP programs, they're great, but there's not a lot of research that says that they actually work or that people actually do them. There's wellness things that are like, well, just eat more vegetables and exercise more, and sure, we should all be doing that, of
Yeah.
course, but that's not going to solve the problem. It's got to be these tangible results, and recognizing what burnout actually is and what stress actually does to the body, what stress does to your body, and then figuring out, all right, how can we actually heal that, which takes time and rest and recovery, and then how do we change our relationship to work so that we can actually go out and continue to be an ER nurse for another 20 years? Because you're right. I mean, the average for an ER nurse is 2 years. I was
Right.
an administrator for 7 years. The average is two. I
Right.
mean, it's bleak, but there is hope, and there are things that we can do, and people are starting to recognize it, which is really hopeful.
Yeah. Do you see any generational influences, where, regardless of your opinion of subsequent generations, that, to you,
Mhm.
to me, to whomever, where there are different attitudes, approaches, choices that the younger healthcare professionals today would be saying, like, I'm not doing that, I've paid my dues in medical school, and I don't, I'm not going to be a better doctor by staying up for the 36 hours that you mentioned earlier, or having a
Mhm.
badge of honor of saying, what's your record? Oh, mine's 41 hours, or anything like that. Is there any
Mhm.
generational influence, that positive influence, that helps change the narrative somewhat?
Yeah, so yes and no. So generational stuff. I actually don't put a lot of stock in all that generational stuff. I believe people are people are people are people,
Yeah,
and it really doesn't matter as much as people think it does.
yeah,
It does matter a little bit. And are there individual differences between people because of how they were raised and how old they are? Of course.
yeah,
But does it matter as much as people say it does? It actually doesn't. The research doesn't pan out. But what I do think is there are these, sectors within the healthcare system that are very tribal, like, doctors, doing, or nurses doing their clinicals, or, doing their rounding. I mean, these people are put through hell and back, and it's almost hazing.
yeah,
So I do think there are these, very horrible tribal rituals that people do to themselves, and then because, oh, I went through it, so you have to go through it. We definitely see that, and that's when mistakes are made, and it is very hard to break through that psychology and break through that, well, I know you did it, but it's not good, so maybe we shouldn't do it anymore.
yeah.
um, it's very difficult to break through those. So that's more what I see is there in terms of training and resource allotment. It's, well, I did it with, we used to do night shift with 2 nurses and a whole hospital. Why can't you? And it's like, that's not the answer. Like, let's
Yeah.
actually look at, safety. Let's look at wellness. Let's look at how people actually learn and how people actually grow. And let's go with that instead of, well, I did it and now I just want to see somebody else suffer because, then because I've been waiting, 20 years to watch someone else suffer through what I went through so that I can, validate my own feelings about how horrible it was. That's not how you train people to be better doctors and better nurses and better healthcare providers.
Yeah, and that stands
Right.
true for any industry and any walk of life, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
And I don't just work with healthcare folks. I had a story that comes to mind is I was working with a corporate attorney that came to me because she was really burnt out, but didn't want to leave. She'd been to law school. She's still a student loan. She's like, I don't want to give all that up, but I'm ready to start a hot dog stand tomorrow because I can't stand it. And she told me this story about it was the jacket on the back of the chair contest at work. You always want to be the attorney that is the first one to put your jacket on the back of your chair and the last one to take it off when you leave for the day. And I'm like, that is a horrible contest.
yeah,
But that was her environment. And we do that in healthcare all the time too. It's just instead of the jacket on the back of the chair, it might be you want to be the last one, leaving your shift. Or as an administrator, I did this. Like I wanted to be the last one, the first one in and the last one to leave because that's what quote unquote leaders do.
yeah,
And it's like, no, like leaders actually set an example and take care of themselves and their people. And that's really what leadership is about. It's not about, a popularity contest because you're the first one in and the last one to leave. That doesn't get anybody anywhere.
yeah, exactly. Of late, last few years for me, I guess I probably was maybe not quite as extreme. I was a consulting project manager, so moving around different companies, helping them with different projects over the years. And as a consulting project manager, you have to work kind of funky hours, especially the closer
Mhm.
to delivery of the project and such like that. And back in the day, even in my full time employment days, there would be time I just enjoyed it, So I would go to work, I would come home, do whatever I was doing at home, and then kind of sit on the couch with the laptop and progress that presentation, send those emails. And it was almost kind of cultural. I didn't ever feel that it was an absolute requirement or that I was any further ahead or behind if I did or didn't do it. It was just a thing. I was younger, I was bubblier, I was kind of like, oh, this is great. Of late, when I get one of those emails 11:51 p.m. or 2:31 a.m., my first thoughts are, and not in a judgy way, but my first thought truly is sad.
Hmm.
If in some way that was intended to impress
Hmm.
anyone at any point, we should have a conversation about that because I believe, certainly from my perspective anyway, it's having a bit of an opposite impact where someone would be saying you can't do your job during the day, you suddenly have to send it at this time. There's no one saying bravo, bravo,
Right.
that's incredible. You're tipped for the top. It's are you not managing your time well enough? Are you not doing the job during the day? Do you need extra help? Are you having trouble sleeping? Is it because of the job? There's a whole bunch of nuanced, avenues that you could take to that. But long gone, for me personally, no, this might be different in corporate land, but long gone is any facet of being impressed by that type
Hmm.
of style of behavior. So if anyone's listening or watching and is doing that, stop it. You're not actually helping anything about anything. So then, in terms of stress and burnout, when we had our pre-chat, we talked about it being a mental disorder of
Hmm.
some description. First time I had ever heard of it
Yep.
categorized or clarified or classified like that, I should say. And subsequent to that, I've kind of ruminated on that quite a wee bit to say, oh, that's different then, because it has a different meaning, a different gravity to it
Hmm.
in terms
Hmm.
of how serious it could and should be taken. So, in terms of the types and styles of clients you're dealing with, I know you try and typically deal with leaders and such. What's the mix? Are you getting people that are coming saying, I'm just about at my maximum right here and I don't want to tip over the edge? Or do you get people that are coming and say, I have no idea what end is up. I don't even know what day it is. I can't even remember how I got here. Or is it a
Hmm.
mix? Where are you at in terms of the stress and burnout continuum, if I could say that?
Yeah, yeah, no, good question. So it is a mix, and if I can go into the diagnosis a little bit, because
Yeah.
I definitely want people to take away. So in 2019, the World Health Organization labeled burnout as a workplace phenomenon. So there's an ICD-11 diagnosis for it, and there's three kinds. So there's frenetic burnout, which I kind of already talked about. So frenetic burnout is where you're channeling too much energy, too much time, too much effort into your work, and then regular rewards are not enough to compensate you. Then there's so that's more intrinsic, that's more internal. Then there's worn out burnout, which is more external pressures. So the culture, the job, your boss, they're externally putting all these pressures onto you, making you work more hours, making you channel too much energy into your work, and then you have nothing left for yourself at the end of the day. So it's worn out. And then undermined burnout, which is not as common, and I don't see these folks, but it's or I'm sorry, under challenged burnout, where you're just not challenged enough. You're just going through the motions. You're not really growing. You're not really doing anything. I kind of think of the character Milton from Office Space, who's stuck in the basement. Like, but those people do not call me. I get a mix of worn out burnout and frenetic burnout, and often it's a mix for both people, especially in healthcare. Like I've mentioned, they've all of a sudden, internally they're channeling too much effort and energy into their work, but also there's external pressures from the culture or their boss or the healthcare system in general. So I get a mix, and I do get a mix of people who are just exhausted. I can't take it anymore. And I also get people who are like, hey, I'm not burned out now, but I have been in the past, and I really love my job, and I don't want to go there. I don't want to cross that line. Can
Yeah.
you help? So I do get a mix of both people.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
obviously, as an advert for coaching, the earlier the better. Fixing things
Yes.
after something has happened is a lot more difficult, and in some cases maybe quite insurmountable than in the former. I have a similar clients as well, where they see the pattern repeating, where everything was okay for a while and now it's starting to get a little bit worrisome. I'm not 100% sure. Oh, it's actually okay again for a wee while. No, no,
Right.
actually it's not. And there's this, it's never a straight line. There's a squiggly line in there to get them to a point where they're saying, I know something is going to happen and it's likely going to come from me, and I'm going to say something to someone else that's going to be a career limiting move at some point.
Yeah, yes.
Help
I love that
me,
phrase.
yeah, help me not do that. So I love the classification of the frenetic, the worn out, and the under
Mhm.
challenge. That I was
Mhm.
busy scribbling that down there. So how do you how do you approach each, and not specifically for each of these, but what's your typical approach when someone comes to you to say, where are we at? How can I help? What's your particular circumstance? What's the best move next? What does that typically look like?
Yeah, yeah. So typically, when I start working with clients, we do an autopsy of their day and their week. And we really find these places where they are overextending themselves, where they are voluntarily, overextending and channeling too much energy in. And we really look at those places where we replace that with some kind of wellness or some kind of rest or some kind of recovery. But I also, put in there a lot of self care tools, things that they've been neglecting. And it's not, if you Google burnout and how to recover from burnout, you'll get like the Google, like, oh, just exercise for 30 minutes a day and just eat more vegetables and all the things that we're supposed to be doing anyway. But that's really not what it's about. It's about knowing what exactly rest is. So for my clients, almost all of them, I recommend a dopamine detox, which is, and there's YouTube videos, there's stuff online about doing like a dopamine detox practice. It's a practice that I do, but basically it's turning off the TV, setting down the phone for long periods of time. I ask my clients to do it for 24 hours at a time, where you're not shopping online, you're not eating rich food, you're meditating, you're journaling, you're allowing your brain to be bored.
Yeah,
And that's the point, because we don't know what boredom actually is,
yeah,
and we don't know what rest actually looks like. And once you stop reaching for that super stimuli, which is actually just kicking up our dopamine and our neurotransmitters to a point where they're getting blown out, and so we need more and more of those super stimuli in order to get that same amount of dopamine, which we do need, in order to survive. If we don't have it, we get, things like, schizophrenia and epilepsy and all sorts of horrible things.
right.
But we, instead of reaching for those super stimuli, like watching Netflix, playing Wordle, um, it's one of my vices. That's why I use that example. I'm human. I live in this world. But if we allow ourselves to actually be bored and actually rest, then we're going to reach for things that don't blow out our dopamine receptors, that give us an appropriate level of pleasure and happiness, like playing with our children, like eating healthy foods, like moving in a way that feels good to us. Like one of my clients, of the corporate attorney I mentioned, she came and she told me to back it on the chair, or jacket on the back of the chair thing, and then she said, "Well, but I'm doing all the things. Like I just started running, so I'm running for 30 minutes every day, and I was told to eat more vegetables, so I started to be a vegan 2 weeks ago." And I'm like, "Stop! Like you're putting stress on an already stressed system. So like if running is your thing, go ahead, keep running. I'm not saying stop, but you don't need to do all of those things in order to recover from burnout. You need to actually let your system rest and recover and be bored and get used to what it feels like to actually reach for those appropriate stimuli and create a cycle of wellness where you're going to be more apt to reach for those things in the future instead of reaching for drugs or alcohol or the TV or junk food. You're going to be more apt to reach for things that are appropriate levels of dopamine for your system. So that's what I do with clients right off the bat. That's really like the first month to 6 weeks is getting those things in place so that they can feel some recovery immediately because they need relief immediately. And then we can start looking at some other things to put together, leadership practices, team dynamic practices, start changing the culture of their particular organization so that they can actually put those wellness boundaries in place for them and have actually sustainable change for not only themselves but the people in their employ.
Yeah, I love that. The addition by subtraction model.
Mm-hmm.
You're adding to the wellness of your life by taking away the things that aren't, serving you in that moment, and it just becomes so subconscious. You alluded to it there, where I was thinking when you were chatting there, my dad has passed away, unfortunately, and when I lived back home, I would go visit him, and then the house would be in darkness, and say it's kind of like dusk, and then I'm thinking that's odd. There's cars there, but there's no light, so I wonder what that is. And I would go in, and he would just be sitting in the chair, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for proof of life,
Right.
everything okay, and then he's like, oh hey son, how you doing? And he was a big TV guy. He liked the TV, but many a day he would come down, and instead of having this automatic reaction, he was retired for a number of years before he passed. And sometimes he would just literally sit and stare out the window. And here was a funny thing for me, Jessica. When I would speak to him every day, multiple times, on many, many occasions each day, but absolutely every single day. We're 4,000 miles apart, 7 hours in time difference, so we had a bit of a routine. And I spoke to this sharp man every day, and he was my best friend, my confidant, my mentor, a whole bunch of things that I never got a chance to tell him that he was, quite frankly, because he passed away, fairly quickly, and as it turned out. And every now and again, I would see a photograph. One of my sisters would take him out for lunch or whatever, his usual day out was to the doctors or something like that, and there would be this wee old man in the photo, and I'm looking because it was a voice call that I would be doing on my way to work or back
Sure.
from work or things like that, and I'm truly speaking to someone who has all of his faculties, has everything about him. We are having spirited conversations every day, and there's this I wouldn't say broken little man there, but he's aging, he's mid-80s at this point, and I thought, wow. So as you were saying, the reduction of dopamine to appropriate levels and such, I wonder, because he was a thinker, the amount of times that he just sat, and there's a big family, and there's lots of different things and people and occasions and events to think about. If that, whatever it was he was doing, because he liked his newspaper every day and he read that, and not a big books guy, but newspapers every day, and it's food for thought. In terms of, I don't know that he was consciously doing it. He just went with the winds of change as to whatever suited him on a given day. But he was certainly giving himself mental breaks from the TV, because he would just get upset with the TV. It's just insulting my intelligence, He would say that sort of thing as we're going forward. And I love the ability to say we need to spend some time on doing this, having an honest assessment in the beginning, because if you add in running, vegetables, vegan, all that kind of thing, and you haven't taken one thing away, you're just compounding the problem. You're not actually helping, So I've done a similar exercise with a number of clients where let's just do a time inventory. Let's just see what you're actually spending your time on. And some of them are kind of like, I don't really, that's not what I'm here to get help with. Humor me,
Yeah.
and then they go away and come back after a week or two, and they kind of go, I spend so much time playing video games. I never realised that. It's just I thought it was my rest and relaxation, but it's actually I play the video games for 2 or 3 hours, and then I get angry that the dishes aren't done, and then I get even more upset the next day that my lunch isn't made. And so they're putting it together on their own.
Yeah.
You know, One thing I wanted to ask you was how often do you see when you mentioned the influence of them, because especially in a leadership perspective, and I feel the exact same. I love to target leaders in terms of my client base, because you have a cascading positive impact that you can get from them if you hit a sweet spot with them, and they follow through in a path that's true to them. How often, or even do you encourage them to share their journey with their community? I'll just say other network, and in terms of that, because sometimes I've experienced where it's not quite taboo, but it's whatever's just a shade above taboo, where they're kind of saying, "This is my own." It's not. It's not therapy, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with therapy, of course.
Right.
But it's kind of coaching, and I'm not going to shout it from the rooftops. I'm just going to just go through my own private and personal journey, and other clients are literally shouting it from the rooftops almost, where they're saying, I need some help. I don't mind asking for it. I'm trying this thing right now. You might see some changes in behaviour. Please let me know if it's working. But I would love your support as we go through this journey. How much do you see in terms of sharing with their network for your clients?
Yeah, yeah, good question. I see both as well. I see people who are extremely open. Like I collaborate. I do a lot of networking. I'm on boards. I do a lot of things. And I happen to be on a conference call, or well, a Zoom call, with it was one of my clients was actually on the Zoom call, because we're just in the same industry
Yeah,
still, and
yeah.
all of that, and they just freely told the entire Zoom call, well, I've been working with Jesseca since August, and she's great, and all of you need to work with her too. And it was very kind, and I loved it, and didn't really know how to handle it, because that was not what the call was about, but. But that was very nice and very kind, and but I also do see people maybe sharing like a little bit in terms of, well, hey, I recognize that you're going through something similar to me, and hey, coaching really helped me, and I think you should talk to Jesseca. And
Right.
so they'll kind of pick people out who are similar or in a similar situation that they were in, and kind of share on the down low. So I have both for sure, but a lot of my clients come from personal referrals of
Right.
other clients,
Yeah.
which is great, and that's the biggest compliment that I can receive.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, my somewhat comedic dream or marketing ploy or something is that someone is going about their business, and then someone in the network says, "Why, like, what's happened to you? What do you
Yeah.
mean? We don't argue about this anymore. You're very well put together. You don't lose your temper anymore. You seem happier. I'm glad you asked. I've been working with Gary for quite some time. Gary, who, well, he's very busy. I don't, he doesn't take on everyone, and tell me more. And then there's this, marketing or scarcity or in some way exclusivity that's come from there. But you're absolutely right. And ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. I have to say, it did take me a wee while to get used to those public displays of affection at times,
Hmm.
because a similar circumstance or similar circumstances have happened to me in the past, and I just kind of, you downplay it a wee bit, and I say, I just presented you with some information. You did something with it, or I just asked you
Yeah.
some questions. You did the work. It's not that, and the people who are learned or educated or who do or know about this type of work. No, that's not what it is, and and the other ones are kind of like, what does that mean, and they're maybe just not thinking, of themselves at that particular point. So, in terms of then, there's a lot of nuggets in the conversation we've had thus far, Jessica. If someone out there, leader or not, healthcare or not,
Hmm.
has got to a point where they are thinking that they are in a burnout situation,
Hmm.
what type and style of common telltale signs would be there for them that they could start to to analyze?
Yeah, yeah. So there are some symptoms, but what I like to have people look for are behaviors, because I think that that's really what we need to learn from. So if people are feeling exhausted, that's the word that I hear from my clients when they first come into coaching. Almost always is, I'm just exhausted. I just have nothing left. If they're feeling disconnected from their friends, from their family, from themselves, things that they used to enjoy. If they're experiencing, constant busyness with no real sense of fulfillment, even when they accomplish a goal, that's a huge symptom.
Yeah.
If they're often over analyzing, often overthinking, if everything feels urgent, if everything feels like it's an emergency, that's actually a symptom of burnout. If they talk themselves out of things that they really do know that are better for them, or they're reluctant to try new strategies, that can be a symptom of burnout, because they're just exhausted and they can't possibly fathom about taking on another thing. If deadlines are dominating their thoughts, if they're having stress-related health issues like high blood pressure or sleep disturbances, cardiac issues, those can be signs and symptoms of burnout. So that's a pretty good list of
Yeah.
symptoms to look out for.
Yeah, and then the recommendation would be to seek professional help. With the
Yes.
first port of call should be a coach or should be a doctor. Should it depend? Therapist. What do you recommend?
Any and all. I really do think if you're experiencing some of these symptoms of burnout, if people do, if they've had with therapy in the past and it's helped, call that therapist again. Therapy, I like to, since I've done both, the way I differentiate it is therapy really focuses on the past and how you not be so reactive to your past. Coaching is all about the future. Here and we kind of go right for the jugular, and we're like, we're not going to talk about your mom for 10 years. We're going to get to the heart of it, and then we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
So that's why I really love the modality of coaching. But even if someone can't afford to work with someone or doesn't want to work with someone right now, there's support groups, there's Facebook groups, there's YouTube videos, there's a lot of online stuff. There's a lot of things that can support if someone's not ready to work with someone. So I would just encourage for someone to just get out there and do something, and just get some kind of help so you can get this kind of relief. Because this stuff is serious. Stress can really affect your body, your brain, your mind, and we think of it as something existential. Like, well, that's out there. Like, yeah, I might have a cardiac issue in 15 years, but that's out there.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, like, I lost 3 colleagues in the last year who are around my age, in their mid 40s, due to symptoms of burnout. I lost my favorite boss ever to alcoholism. I had no idea he drank. I lost a very close colleague to a heart attack at 49. And then, I lost another one who completed suicide. Like it, I've lost 3 people in the last year, and they were all these leaders who were completely burnt out and thought they still had time to make a different decision, or it wasn't quote unquote that bad, or, well, I was bad in this other job, but I'm just going to find another job and it'll be fine. You're lying to yourself. This stuff is serious, and you do have to take it seriously. And there are people that are depending on you. You have a job, you have a family, you have friends that love you. Get yourself some help. And that I would say, definitely do the things that you need to do in order to take care of yourself so that you can take care of other people.
Definitely take it seriously. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
as you know, Jessica, this is the Best You interview series, and as part of that, I like to ask each guest, what regular practice do you employ to give Jesseca the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself?
Yeah. I do practice what I preach. I practice my dopamine detox that I talk to you about. I do that every day. I try to spend at least, a half an hour to an hour just alone with my thoughts. Or at least just, every single day, just turn off everything and just, be with my family, alone with myself, go for a walk. I do those things. I work out. I have a movement practice that I enjoy and that I love. And then, I don't feel so guilty to watch Netflix and, play Wordle, in the background because, I do these practices and I'm human. I live in this world. I'm not perfect. But, if I know that if I do those practices, I have a very significant journaling practice. That's another thing that I preach. I have a whole journaling series for my clients that they really enjoy. Those are the things that I do that contribute to me being the best me. And sometimes I'm better than others, just like everybody. Yeah. But as long as I do those things, then I feel like, and I feel like I'm the best version of myself now than, when I was working 60 hours a week and on call 24/7 and not sleeping and, not being there for myself or anybody else, just going through the motions and not being mentally present.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. Before I let you go, Jesseca, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, my company is Solutions for Health, so SOUL. So if they just go to solutionsforhealth.com and it's FOR spelled out. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm most present on LinkedIn. That's the social media that most people can find me on, and I post stuff on there and post articles and things like that. But you can sign up for my blog, my newsletter. I give out free sessions. So if you would like a free session, I am happy to talk to you for an hour and we can unpack some of your stuff, and I'm happy to do that.
Fantastic. Jesseca, I knew this was going to be a brilliant session. I'm delighted to get the opportunity to do it. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Gary. Anytime.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.